Hi, my name is Chris and I'm making this nature video for the Stuart Low Trust. Today I'm at Hatfield House in Hertfordshire and I've come to see an historic Elizabethan knot garden that's being managed to be of benefit to wildlife. So as you're walking through the West Garden, you walk in and you think, well, it's all just formal clip box hedge. Absolutely beautiful, it's beautifully done, but then you look, there's a bit of statuary and just really closely cut lawn. But then as you come up towards the house, well, palace actually, and you come to the steps down into the formal knot garden, you realise that something else is going on. So as you walk down, you realise there's a band with a new yew hedge planted of wild meadow, and it's really lovely because you're coming down into the dip. It's all at eye level, so you're looking at all these wildflowers like fluffy yellow bedstraw, oxeye daisies, there's some little yellow pea flowers of bird's foot trefoil, there's the flat white heads of yarrow, and also all the flowering grasses, you know, that normally you'd be worried about hay fever and duck in the dive, but normally it'd be all cut off by now. But then you realise that it's just in a formal band. The whole bank surrounds the whole of the formal knot garden, and I think it is really, really clever. And it's being managed as meadow. So in it you can see lots of seed heads of yellow rattle. Now yellow rattle, or there's some still in flower, just bear with me, I've got to sort of try and get in so I don't flatten everything. But there's some still flowering down here. Oh, that's easier to see. So this is yellow rattle, and it's called yellow rattle, if I can find some, because when the seed is ripe and you move it, you can hear the seeds rattling in it. And the reason this is such an important constituent of a flower meadow is because it's a hemiparasite, so its roots attach to the roots of all the grasses, and it takes its nutrient directly from the roots of the grasses. So it's not a full parasite because it has got green leaves, so it can make its own food, but it takes a lot of the nutrient from the grass, and this suppresses the growth of all the grasses, which means they're not quite as competitive, which means there's space between all the grasses for the wildflowers to grow. Normally on really high nutrient soils and where ground's really fertilised with lots of manure every year, it's far too high nutrient for the wildflowers to be able to compete. They just get pushed out by the grass. But here, where it's managed as a meadow, a traditional meadow, so it will be cut quite soon, I reckon. I'd have thought it would be cut July into August. And then all the clippings will be taken off so they don't rot down and add to the nutrient of the soil. But it means you've got this beautiful long grass, in effect wild meadow, surrounding the formal Elizabethan knot garden. And you can see it on the other side. It just follows the boundary of the whole garden, and it is just so clever. And I can imagine in spring they've got lots of bulbs planted, but even now you can see they've got the species Lily and Martagon, which is producing these lovely Turk's cap flowers. So it's known as a Turk's cap lily because they're meant to look a bit like turbans. And they've been planted into the bank, into the wildflower bank, to increase the summer interest. Isn't it beautiful? It's inspiring. Because when you look at the structure of it, it's very clever what they're doing here. And so when you think it's that, keeping the formal elements of this historical house and historical palace. And so the structure of the garden is the outside boundary is yew, about 8 foot tall, big yew hedge. And then recently planted is to come up and develop another yew hedge. Then the wildflower meadow banks surrounding the whole garden with formal clipped hawthorn hedges, which is extremely good for wildlife. Before you come down into the box knot garden with all the flowers. It really is inspirational. It's beautiful and so good for wildlife. So this knot garden is known as the Old Palace Garden, and this is the Old Palace. And it's part of the palace where Elizabeth I lived for 2 years, where she was sort of under house arrest, put under house arrest by Queen Mary, her sister, who thought she was a threat to the throne. And so she was kept here for 2 years. And she was actually staying here when news came that Mary had died and that she was now Queen of England and had ascended to the throne. Of course, she would have known it well because it was also her childhood home and she was brought up here. And it's a lovely building, and the formal knot garden sets it off beautifully. And so away from the wildflower banks that you've walked in past, you come in, and it is a formal Elizabethan knot garden, made with box and filaria, but it's filled with this lovely selection of old roses, herbaceous plants, annuals and herbs, but some of the combinations are just so special. Here you've got clary sage, which is in this lovely pinky mauvey with hooded lit violet blue flowers, but it's been paired with this lovely species foxglove, and the combination is just gorgeous of this soft creamy greeny yellow with the blues and pinks. And then dotted round it are clouds of intense magenta pink dianthus, and then right next to it, having seeded down amongst the old seed heads of poppies, are lovely yellow hawksbeards. That remind you that you've walked past the long wildflower banks in the midst of this more formal planting. It's just lovely. In front of the hedges and areas, there's bits that have been grown from seed, annuals. And one I particularly like is this, which is an annual Buplurum, and it's called Thorawax. But it has these sort of chartreuse yellowy green flower heads, which are made up of lots and lots of small flowers that, being open and flat, will be just ideal for pollinators. a bit chilly today, so there's not many things on the ring. But I think it's very, very effective, and particularly where they've got California poppies coming up through, which are these clear, intense orange, and it's just a lovely, lovely pairing. Lovely range of colours though. So you have these really intense yellows, the Coreopsis daisies, which are really popular with pollinators, and even here a green bottle, lots of flies and hoverflies, and then next to it this lovely cool violet purple penstemon. Lovely colour. Open flowers with a white throat, so really good for pollinators. And then behind it, got a lovely old pink rose, which even on the air at this distance I can smell it. And more salvias that are just loved by bees. Exceptional planting. Really, really beautiful. And you can see places where you've got really formal Elizabethan knot garden, as opposed to all the open areas being filled just with disposable, expensive, non-sustainable bedding. They've got permanent perennials. So you've got a rose, geraniums underneath, big clump of this lovely magenta penstemons. These catenanches, and behind you've got geraniums and roses, veronicastrums, which are the vertical spires, which will start opening in about a month. Pink dianthus that are good for the bees, furry-leaved ballotta, which will have little pink flowers, that is much loved by solitary bees. Flowering sages, and then just coming to the end of its long spring season of flower is this, which is a perennial honesty, where we've seen before biennial honesty, but this has a different shape seed pod. You can see them just starting to ripen, and they're like elliptical, but like the normal honesty, they will hang on the plant as decorative seed heads. Knot garden has some lovely plants. So you've got this Lychnis. This is Lychnis chalcedonica, also known as Maltese cross. And it's a bit of a floppy perennial usually. Has these really unusual colours, these really scarlet, a real true scarlet, tall spikes of flowers. But they have weak ankles, so they often fall over. They need staking. And here you can see where the wind's caught them, and they have sort of flopped, but because they're being grown in the small windows of the knot garden, they can't go right over, so visually they're all still standing up and making a fantastic display. Don't they look smashing? Yeah, I've got some lovely roses. Most of them are old type roses, but this one has the most beautiful sherbety rose scent. Just fantastic. So many of the plants here have been chosen both for their ornamental appeal, but also their benefit for wildlife. So here you have giant scabious, Cephalaria gigantia, that has these lovely pincushion soft cream flowers. It's quite tall, it's about 5 foot, can get larger, but even on a cool day like today, there's bumblebees on it and honeybees are visiting. I can't get closer without walking in the beds. So if you can't see, you'll sort of have to take my word for it. But it's just lovely as well. Lovely colour. And also, just in front of it, in another hole in the knot, is a repeat of the yellow foxglove, and it just matches perfectly. Whoever's doing this has got a very good eye.